To all our viewers, welcome to Gabon 24. You at the interview. We actually here in Libreville at the Radisson, where is hosted the seventh edition of the seminary, the high-level seminary on peace and safety in Africa, under the theme clearing out weapons within the African continent and creating a favorable space for children. And we're having with us today our guest, Honorable Dr. MUSABAYANA from Zimbabwe, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Trade. Thank you, Minister. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Yan.
Okay. And first of all, we'll be opening this interview by knowing the importance and the relevance of this high-level seminary. What actually are your thoughts on the importance of the seminary?
Thank you very much, Mr. Yan. This is a very important seminar because it's focusing on the peace and the stability of Africa. When you talk of silencing the guns, we are talking of dealing with the fundamentals or the issues that destabilize peace. So when we deal with issues that destabilize peace, then we'll come to the issue of silencing the guns. So this is a very important, and it is the future of Africa. As you know that Africa has got troubled spots where we have people fighting, we have people in war.
Okay. And just like you said, and you mentioned all these countries that are into war, and as you mentioned, Libya, the Central African Republic, and also other countries. And how determining is this conference held by African continents to resolve these issues? How determining? How could it be resolved in a manner of maybe time and then suggestion and solution proposed? How could it be?
Thank you, Mr. Yan. This is important. This is an important conference, because we are looking now at the Agenda 2063, building the Africa we want. How do we build it is premised on peace and stability. So in order to look at or to deal with the troubled spots of Africa, where we like the regions that we have been talking about, the central issue is the control of the means of production. So if we deal with the issue around the control and equitable distribution of the means of production within our member states, then we'll be able to resolve the issues around conflict. We'll be able to reduce pressure within those countries. Then we also, if we are to deal with the means of production, we are also looking at issues around climate change, because climate change is creating problems in certain areas where there's hunger, there's perpetual droughts, and these areas where people are destabilized, they move to other member states or they encroach into other nations. And again, that creates conflict. So issues around dealing with causalities for poverty, causalities for children abuse or child abuse, or the abuse of the Bill of Rights of Children, will go a long way ensuring peace and stability in Africa, and thus silencing the guns.
Yeah, okay. And just like you say, silencing the gun. And what could be the apport? How can the international, the UNI, like the United Nations, how could the United Nations participate within this fight against weapons, silencing weapons within Africa? Because as we know, we have an African representative within the United Nations. And how could the United Nations participate in this fight against the weapons in Africa?
The participation of the United Nations is critical in silencing the gun, in that if you look at the challenges that we have in the troubled spots or areas, there's a lot of illicity in the movement of guns. And if AU member states agree and set up a framework where there's strict control in the movements of illicit guns, then it will also help in stopping unnecessary wars. Then also in the issue of poaching, where there are some member states that are coaching or are sponsoring poaching in some countries or in other member states. In the process, guns are moved into those areas where because they want to poach. But after all the animals have been poached, of the animals are no longer in the areas, those guns remain there. And to sustain a living, the poachers will now instigate wars.
Yeah.
And this can create problems in the region or problems in some of our member states. So UN has to create a fund that deals with climate change, a fund that deals with protection of wildlife, a fund that also deals with the control of trafficking of arms.
Okay.
Or illegal arms.
Yeah, especially just like you mentioned, poaching, and you also mentioned climate change. Obviously, climate change is a theme that always come back because, as we can see, it's something that is affecting the world as a whole. Personally, as a Zimbabwean representative for Zimbabwe, what can Zimbabwe personally, on the personal level, on the country level, what can Zimbabwe bring to this African fight for against weapon? And you mentioned poaching, and especially in Zimbabwe, there are reserves such as the Kruger National Park that shares the border with South Africa. How can this be? What are the decisions that have been taken within the Zimbabwean government to fight against this thing, and how could they be relevant to be applied to other countries?
Thank you. There are a lot of lessons that can be drawn from Zimbabwe and be replicated in the region. Zimbabwe has become one of the key players in the conservation of wildlife.
Yeah, that's true.
In actual fact, we actually have challenges with wildlife in our country where the human-animal conflict is spiked. Why? Because of the high population that we now have of elephants, which are way beyond the carrying capacity of the country. And there are laws that limit us from culling the animals. There are laws that are also limiting us from trading with the elephant. There are also laws that also limit us from selling the tusks. So, as a nation, as a member states who is very active in conserving wildlife, we think it is important that as AU adopts a framework where we look at sustainable management of wildlife, and that management should reduce conflict between human and animals. On the other hand, Zimbabwe has also taken steps to reduce or to curtail possibilities of conflict. Where we just had the recent election, His Excellency President Idi Mnangagwa saw it important that all political players have a round table, which we call Pollard, where they come together and discuss and chat the way forward as a nation and bury their political differences. This reduces conflict because the source of all wars is conflict. The government has also come up with programs to educate the youth, also programs to fund women and youth, where they put aside a budget in the bank, in the empowerment bank, that focuses primarily on children, on youth and women. And that is go a long way in reducing poverty, and thus reduces all forms of conflict.
Yeah, okay. That's actually when you mentioned taking care of women and children, that's actually where we're going. As the selected team this year is actually shutting down, creating a favorable environment for children that are affected and misplaced. As you can see, and we're talking about this Africa entering in this new decade of 2020, what is the place that children within Africa, the African continent, have to play in this fight? As you can see, leaders are now involving themselves in creating this place. But how important is it for children and the future of Africa?
Thank you very much. The children of Africa are the future of Africa, and the position that they take now is critical. So what is important is empowerment of the children. How do we empower the children? We educate them. Yeah. When we educate them with the relevant education and skills, it will go a long way in empowering them to be able to be masters of their own destiny. So in Zimbabwe, the government has set up innovation centers where those people coming from colleges or universities will be incubated into entrepreneurs. The government has also come up with a BEAM, a basic education assisted module, where all vulnerable children are assisted to go to school. And once children get assisted to go to school or get access to education, they are preoccupied, and thus reduces their risk of them indulging in drugs, the risk of them getting conscripted or joining warlords or into war activities. So it is important that governments form policies or framework that support the children.
Yeah, and obviously this could be applied to other countries, just like you mentioned earlier, and then we'll speak about the women who have always been maybe put aside when it comes to developing Africa, when it comes to taking that step to push Africa further. What is the place that the woman itself can play within this development way that is being opened?
Thank you very much. The issue of women is critical to the existence of humankind, and because of that role, they should also be given space to actively participate in development. In Zimbabwe, what the government has done is has come up with a zebra cross, where they say we have a system where women are empowered. How? By ensuring that every institution, every government institution, and even encouraging private sector, women occupy at least 50% of the influential position.
Yeah.
This ensures that women actively participate in development and also are in charge of their destiny. There's also a close nexus between a child and the mother.
Yeah.
So once we empower the women, we are in turn empowering the children. So it is important that governments empower women, and in our country, President Idi Mnangagwa has actually ensured that there is more representation of women in government in terms of posts. They've also put in place a mechanism where women participate in parliament. So they have renewed a constitutional provision that we are in the process of renewing a constitutional provision that allows a quota system or giving a certain number of seats for women to participate in parliament without them going through the rigorous process of voting.
Yeah, okay, that's actually, thank you very much. We've reached the end of our interview, and to our viewers, we were actually with Honorable Dr. David MUSABAYANA from Zimbabwe, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Trade. Thank you very much, sir, for blessing us with your presence.
Thank you, viewers. Thank you for this interview.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, that's the end of our interview. Don't forget, information continues live at YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. It's your interview. Bye-bye.